taking part in drills, and nothing more. Supposed computer malfunctions at American and United ensured that all 4 planes only had 20% occupancy on board, on a day when flights on the East Coast were an average of 80% full. Once the decoys, known as hijackers, were on board the planes, a gas was released, knocking out the occupants of the aircraft. Then a small criminal group, in control of remote control systems patented for over 20 years, took control of the aircraft and flew them into the World Trade Centers and Pentagon. The CIA-controlled drills that morning confused NORAD for over an hour until it was almost too late for them to shoot down the hijacked planes. I said almost too late. When they did find out, Dick Cheney wouldn't let the planes fly over 350 miles an hour, so 3 of the aircraft were able to hit their targets. The 4th wasn't able to because our sources in the Pentagon have told us generals didn't follow their orders and had Flight 93 shot down. If it would have hit its target, the Capitol, the government would have been completely decapitated and the president could have declared total martial law. By the grace of God, everything didn't go as planned. And so now the globalists have spent the last 3.5 years trying to cover up the sloppy job they did on 9/11. They're counting on the public not being able to face the horror of what really took place so they can carry out another, even more devastating attack and finish the job they started, enslaving America and using the country as an engine to take over the planet. The only thing that can stop them now is the American people having the courage to face the truth about 9/11 and to expose it. If we don't, they're going to continue to use problem, reaction, solution. And it's going to be sad to watch the American people after the next attack going to the very killers that carried it out, begging them to protect them. And it's sad to see the deaths of these 2,800 plus people being used to sell a police state in America. You know, Bush says the terrorists attacked us, whoever the terrorists are, because they hate our freedom. Well, then why is the government, period, whether it's George Bush or John Kerry, trying to kill our freedoms? America isn't America if we don't have these God-given freedoms. That's why this country is loved. No, now we're being forged into a tool of global empire to be launched against sovereign, innocent nations that we know had nothing to do with 9/11.
The Republicans are here and taking advantage of the 3,000 people that died right behind me for their own selfish politics, and it's very sad. I cried here for the first time today. I come here all the time. I've never cried here before. For some reason, I cried for the future because the way they're exploiting these dead people.
Because in your guts, you know that the criminals are returning to the scene of the crime to gloat and to use the bloody sacrifice they committed.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
So now Bush is here in the Big Apple using the deaths as an attempt to get reelected.
September 11th. September 11th, men armed with knives, armed with chemical, biological, or even nuclear weapons. The fanatics who terrorist killers, September 11th, terrorists of Al-Qaeda, terrorists, Taliban, nuclear weapons, terrorists. 9/11 terror. My fellow Americans, we have already been attacked. Terror, terrorist, evil.
September 11th, in those days after the towers fell.
September 11th. September 11th, ground zero. And suddenly the streets were full of sirens and there was fire in the sky. Terrorism, September 11th. Osama bin Laden declared war on America. September 11th, terrorists, a walking, talking weapon of mass destruction.
Barbaric terrorists, terrorists or terrorism. September 11th, September 11th. The terrorists, war and danger. September 11th, September 11th, terrorism. Global terrorism, the horror. Terrorism, terrorists. Terrorists, 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 the terrorists. Terrorists, terrorist, terrorism. September 11th, global terrorism, terrorism. Terrorism. September 11th, world terrorism, terrorism. Terrorism, 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 terrorist. September 11th. Threat of global terrorism, terrorism, terrorist, global terrorism, terrorism, terrorism. September 11, 2001, global terrorism. Terrorists, global terrorism, terrorism, terrorists, September 11th, terror.
Terrorism, the attack on our homeland, back from the attack on our economy, and back from the attack on our way of life. Terrorism, terrorists, hate. We must be fierce and relentless and terminate terrorism. Terrorists, you defeat them. It yearns to destroy not just the individual, but the entire international order. That's why America is safer with George W. Bush as president.
September 11th, terrorism, September 11th. Terrorism, terrorists, September 11th.
Hera, terrorist. Terrorist.
Terror. September 11th. Threat. Tyranny. Terrorist. Tyranny. Tyranny. People hate us. Terror.
Terrorism. September the 11th. Terrorist, 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 terror. Weapons of mass destruction. September the 11th. September the 11th. Terrorists, terrorists. The evil terrorists. Terrorists. The terrorists know.
The terrorists know.
The elite know we're restless, that we're catching on to their scam. That's why they're now using sound wave weapons that the military has used in Iraq on the streets of America. There's your LRAD, ladies and gentlemen, used against the Iraqis, used against the Palestinians, and now used against us in America. We're getting reports that about this garden, they're already using them. Long before 9/11, they were getting the sound wave weapons, the microwave weapons ready, building all the emergency containment facilities. They knew all this was coming. How you doing, officer? Did you know I interviewed the CEO of this company a few years ago? Our boys are using these in Iraq, aren't they?
No comment. Ask all questions to DCPI, Commissioner Paul Brown.
I'm from Austin, Texas. Are those the guys in the white outfits? Right. Do you know what those are?
What?
Those are sound wave weapons they're using in Iraq. They can burst.
Oh, it's because of now they're out here to be
Police. What do you think of it?
I don't know anything about it. It might be necessary, but I doubt it. I think everyone knows it's a peaceful protest. So.
Yeah, I mean, well, the point is that these are things used in Iraq against enemies, and now it's being used right here in America. Now that the government in general considers the American people enemies of the state, defense contractors have a whole new lucrative market, selling high-tech weapons normally sold to the military to the police. We're on our way to a protest that's unauthorized, not permitted. They've been arresting people by the thousands, and we're going to cover it. Of all the hundreds of huge protests we've seen, a small group broke off with a unpermitted march and is moving down towards Madison Square Garden, or MSG as New Yorkers call it. Now notice as we walk here that the roads have all been pinned conveniently ahead of the march. So tourists, anybody that's in here to be arrested, and we are now inside the pins. And look at them hurting us. Look at their cars hurting us. I wonder if it'll be like Monday night. I wonder if they'll run horses and mopeds into us.
11:35. If you're here at 11:35, they will arrest you.
But I'm sorry.
They're hardly letting people out. They're opening up the pens a little inch to let people slowly trickle out. So they're and now we're getting in trouble for letting y'all know.
Well, that little story about how they were going to arrest people really worked. Look, everybody's leaving. Police then went in with barricades and broke the protest up into 4 different blocks and randomly arrested innocent people. It was the same story over and over and over again, and police brutality was completely out of control. Reporters for Reuters, the Associated Press, student reporters, tourists, even an American Spectator reporter was arrested and taken to Pier 57. Look around you. Prison is being built. A high-tech, cashless society control grid. We're now going to explore the ruling elite in the world today and what their driving ideology and philosophies are. We'll also look at their minions, the people that slavishly serve them. Well, here we are all the way from Austin, Texas, covering the Republican National Convention. What we're seeing here is Skull and Bones coronation number 2. Well, down here you can see the CNN staff, Bush Light. They love the president, put out all the propaganda. They also worship Kerry. So does Fox News when it comes to worshiping Bush. So here's the so-called mainstream media you can trust, which is nothing more than basically a CIA front to propagandize and manipulate the people. But it's all in a slick packaging with a great, impressive background, and that's what people respond to. You know what? I bet most of those so-called Texans down there from that Texas delegation aren't even first-generation Texans. They're just as phony as George W. Bush is. A guy who is from Kennebunkport, Maine, whose daddy speaks with a perfect Atlantic accent. People who were Tories back in the Revolutionary War. They came down carpetbagging to Texas when George was a little boy. And now so many Texans and phony Texans have been sucked in by this and just love the whole motif. But again, it's form over substance.